Both of my great-grandfathers have been a part of that study. My roots in environmental health come from my great-grandfathers. They were sharecroppers, and then later they were able to own land for their family for generations to come. My ancestors' connection to the land has given me a strong care for our environment and how that environment influences human health. I am a fierce advocate for equitable treatment for all. The ways in which COVID-19 ravaged Black communities showed that we have underlying vulnerabilities when something like a pandemic hits. The path from tragedy to triumph travels along the path of learning.
True Black Essentials is a retail opportunity to bring Black businesses under one roof where every product on every shelf in every aisle will be Black owned and Black produced by people all over the world. Statistics show that the $1.3 trillion of spending power that we have as Black people can easily be turned into each Black person having $2 million if we were to shop Black for 2 years. So True Black Essentials will launch an e-commerce store on November 1st, 2020, but we will open up brick and mortar stores in Atlanta, New Orleans, Charlotte, Houston, and Jacksonville, with the very first store opening in Atlanta, June 19, 2021.
You're looking for the latest information on Southern University sports, the Southwestern Athletic Conference, and HBCU athletics. There's only one place to go. Tune in to the Carlos Brown Show, exclusively on the Black College Sports Network.
Oh, that spin class was brutal. Well, you can try using the Buick's massaging seat.
Ooh, yeah, that's nice. Can I use Apple CarPlay to put some music on?
Sure, it's wireless.
Pick something we all like. Okay, hold on. What's your Buick's Wi-Fi password?
Buick Envision 2021.
Oh, you should pick something stronger. That's really predictable.
That's a really tight spot. Don't worry, I used to hate parallel parking.
Me too.
Hey.
Really outdid yourself.
Yes, we did.
The all-new Buick Envision, an SUV built around you, all of you.
This is the BCSN Pod Zone, your place for the news, views, and conversations about all things related to HBCU athletics. Here are the BCSN Sports Wrap, Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab, Knights of the Round Table, the pregame show, the Carlos Brown Show, the ONG Strike Zone, and more in one place. We are changing the way you consume HBCU sports, one broadcast at a time.
And he picks up a first down.
And I'm going to go back to, we talked to our friends, Charles Bishop and Neely. They follow Jackson State football and having dinner with them. I mean, they said this team feels like nobody can score 3 times on them. 3 times. He didn't say if it was 3 field goals, 3 touchdowns. Prairie View has scored twice. Touchdown, field goal. That's how good this defense is. And, whoa, they are as good as advertised.
4th best in all of FCS.
It got to get to the point where whoever we're doing the broadcast that week of the game, they're going to have to sit down with y'all because y'all know us better than everybody.
Sure.
And y'all know some of the inside stuff.
We do.
That I may not tell them because I don't trust them, but
sure. Trust us.
Okay. Trust y'all.
We appreciate that.
We
trust.
appreciate that, Coach.
Much love, baby.
Nope. Nope.
Come on, him.
Ooh, I like him.
Quick, the quicker picker-upper. Bounty picks up messes quicker, and each sheet is 2 times more absorbent, so you can use less.
He's an 8.
He's a 9.
Bounty, the quicker picker-upper.
yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won. Yeah. I hope my team they won. Yeah. Man, I hope my team they won. I hope my team they won. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavill, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with this hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
Good afternoon, good evening. This is Dr. Cavill inside HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. As you see, Mike Washington is still out on assignment, and we have the professor, visiting professor. You're gonna have to switch you to a clinical professor. You regular, man. You just stepped up your game.
Does that come with a check, Doc?
Yeah, no. That's significant difference between an adjunct and a visiting professor. You know, one, you get a little stipend, these parts, it's like $5,000 per class versus the clinical, you up to 57, 65, depending on the department. So yeah, it's a little difference between 20,000 over a year versus 57, a little different.
Can I get a little Blue Cross and then we might be able to talk? I'm just playing with you, man.
Yeah. You get the Blue Cross.
There you go.
Adjunct, not so much. You don't get none of that. You don't get none of that adjunct level.
You got to do the Obamacare with the adjunct.
You know how to negotiate like that. Yeah. So welcome to episode 226 of Inside HBCU Sports Lab radio show and podcast. The show that's covering the sporting HBCU dash for all things HBCU sports, from institutions large and small, from the NAIA to the NCAA. We share insights and information on HBCU sports culture, HBCU athletic aesthetics, to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs in the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavill, along with my co-host, Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. We're filming from our home studios and sending a signal live to KCOH 1230 AM studios with the Texas Radio Hall of Famer and a beautiful home at Texas Southern University from Houston, Texas. Professor Bishop,
Doc,
you on tenure track, so you better be writing them paper. So
right,
either that or got to pull in that grant money.
I know, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Grant money in my life.
Starting to get some dissertation time. So doing well. It's great to be back here as we kick off 2022 and get into it. Got a lot of stuff to get into.
Right, I'm gonna start it off. I just want to see my opinion. I'm gonna take myself out. Of it because people will say I'm biased. So I'm gonna ask you this question: which is the biggest hire? Valdosta Stoke Division II coach who has ties to a HBCU, Texas Southern University, on that staff previously, or former Pro Bowl defensive back hired as Prairie View head coach, who was the interim previous an assistant coach, Bubba McDowell. Starting with you, Professor Bishop, since you're on the tenure track. You say you just gonna do your dissertation first. I got you. Yeah, you're bad, man. Between the two, what is the biggest news of the day to you when you heard those two things? Which one's bigger?
I don't know. I think it depends on the region. If you're over there in that Georgia area, Georgia, Florida area, and Valdosta State hires their first black coach, that is huge news over there. Those of us over here in SWAC country from Alabama over to Texas, Prairie View hiring Bubba McDowell. That was big news today in the Southwestern Athletic Conference. Prairie View now has made their interim their head coach, and we go forward with the Bubba McDowell era.
Charles is so smart. He likes to play the line. He gonna play right in the middle. No, Charles. Which is the bigger hire? I don't want to split the coach. Which one garnered more thoughts in terms of what you've seen in regards to a professional hire, in terms of the framework, is bigger than you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously on my timeline, the news today was Bubba McDowell becoming the head coach at Prairie View, especially when you take a look at Prairie View coming off their SWAC West championship. He now takes over the reins for a team that has ascended to elite status over there in the SWAC West with those teams such as Southern Grambling and UAPB. So that was the big news for me today.
Professor Drew?
Well, I live on that side of the Mississippi, that other side of Mississippi that you were talking about, Charles, number one. Number two, I stay 45 minutes from the campus of Valdosta State University. So that is definitely a bigger hire to be, maybe not bigger, but definitely a more shocking hire of the two hires for me, especially having worked in Valdosta once upon a time, living in that region. And, you know, I know y'all love football down in Texas, but that particular city, football is, I mean, it's God, it's King, it's Bishop, it's Buddha, it's everything else. You know, that there are two high schools in that city. Both of those high schools are perennial state powers here in the state of Georgia, where I live at. And of course, we know the history of Valdosta State, in which they doing, you know, they won it 3 years ago. They were runner-ups this year. So for that to happen, and then not only is he the first Black head coach in Valdosta State history, but he's the first Black head coach in the Gulf South Conference. Let's take that out one step, everybody. First Black coach and Black head coach in the Gulf South Conference. So that is, from a social and cultural standpoint, that is definitely a bigger story for the Texas Southern hire. It's just another ex-NFL player who's come back to an HBCU.
Wow, this is why I love this show. We can literally, as a professor, we can do case studies live on the show. And as Charles said, you know, maybe you get an A+, maybe you're going to move from the dissertation to tenure track, you know, skip adjunct to, you know, clinical professors AD, because you said it depends on the side of the world you live on. What is the bigger news? So to your point, touche, you know, I give you a lot of credit there. That was interesting perspective from both of y'all, and certainly valid points were made. So I'm intrigued about that. We're going to go back to you, Charles, and continue. What's some other significant news was out there today?
Well,
this past week.
Black College Football Hall of Fame announces their 2022 class. So let's go through those new members of the Black College Hall of Fame class 22. Ben Coates, tight end, Livingstone College. Donald Driver, wide receiver from Alcorn. John Big Train Moody, running back from Morris Brown College, 1939-1941. The great Roscoe Nance, contributor, Tuskegee University. Nate Newton, offensive lineman from Florida A&M. The great William Billy Nix, head coach, Morris Brown and Prairie View A&M University. And Sammy White, wide receiver from Grambling State. Those are the 2022 class of the Black College Football Hall of Fame class.
Fascinating. I would be remiss if I didn't jump on. Before I do that, let me get out here and make sure we talk about North Carolina Central Mourns the passing of basketball legends Sam Jones, from reported at abc11.com, other sources, obviously, HBCU Sports, HBCU Game Day. Quick story, my previous associate dean of academic affairs, position that I currently hold in the interim role at Texas Southern University, I traveled with Dr. Cunningham to the CIAA to see the tournament. And he played with Sam Jones back in the CIAA tournament. He was at all conference CIAA guard himself at Virginia State. He's in the Virginia State fame. And he introduced me to Sam Jones. And we literally got a chance to talk about the CIAA. And, you know, like, gentlemen of that nature to get together and really talk about the fond memories. It was fascinating just being able to sit at the feet, literally, of these legends, whether you're talking about legends in the CIAA Hall of Fame, or in case of Sam Jones, a legend in the NBA, in its infancies in terms of, as you know, the multiple championships, 10 Boston Celtics legend who passed this past Thursday. I know we hadn't a chance to touch on it last show, but I thought it'd be well to really get a chance to in depth and tell that story to everybody in regards to the connections and the brief moment that I had to touch on what I call just in terms of as a person and certainly what he was able to do with his skills. So I wanted to share that with everybody out there. Passing Sam Jones, the legendary. And before we move forward, since we are dealing with that honorance, Coppin State mourns the passing of Reggie Smith. This comes from MEAC Sports. Coppin State University Department of Athletics mourns the passing of former Eagles baseball coach Reginald Reggie E. Smith. Smith battled with illness for 2 years in transition the same day, December 30th last week as well. Smith was Coppin State's head baseball coach from 1984 to 87, achieving an overall record of 46-106-1. He helped transition Coppin from NAIA to Division I, which is a bit feeding this of Coppin State in 1985. When the best season was when the Eagles went 17-28. So while his record may not speak in terms of his overall performance, but he certainly was a beacon of light for Coppin State. The Eagles, significant when you talk about transitioning from NAIA to NCAA and those type of things. So I wanted to at least make sure we remembered those gentlemen in terms of what they ever get done. I'm so glad in terms of the Hall, obviously, anytime I hear Prairie View A&M attached to that, Coach Billy Nix, I do not think he gets the credit in terms of being what I would call. Obviously, I don't like to use the Mount Rushmore terminology. I use the Greenborough's four because I like to talk about HBCUs and the connection and the Africana perspective of Blackness, if you allow me to use that framework. So we're talking about 4 dignitary students in terms of that. Obviously, we're talking about Billy Nix and what he did for Prairie View. He is somebody that I believe stands alone in terms of the top 4 coaches historically over a period of time. And when you match him up, you go read that story. And we talked about this the other day that I got to do with Brian in terms of chasing greatness when we were looking at saving with some of the legendary coaches. And obviously Steve Gaither, rightfully so, jumps out there in terms of that, in terms of some of those Eddie Robinson as legendary coaches. And we went back and forth, and Charles got to talk about a legendary coach in Jackson State. And we talked about Tennessee State's legendary coaches, Southern. And oftentimes, until you bring it up and you really bring it up, Billy Nix doesn't necessarily get the credit. And he had winning records, non-losing records, winning records against those other recognized coaches of his time. And he coached right in the middle of that, 4 championships, 5 championships overall. Obviously had Prairie View at the height in the 50s and 60s when HBCU was probably at its greatest zenith in terms of some of the greatest players and coaches of the time. He was right there in the mix. And so because of the dip of Prairie View's history and that 80 losing streak and not maintaining that level, a lot of that gets lost. But you talk about the College Hall of Fame, he's in there.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you pushed that out. With that, as we're up on the break, let's get into this break and then we'll come back and give AD a chance to maybe get in some news. And then we're going to get into some basketball talk. Basketball and hardwood is kicked off across the country, non-conference games, but we got some conference games. Division II, we'll look at that maybe in the second half of the show, but we'll talk about SWAC in terms of Division I, see what type of surprises. We have a big shot, buzzer beater, yesterday on the women's side that we get to talk about in a rival matchup, big time matchup. Stick with us, we can bring it back and give you that information right after this quick break.
Support the Black College Sports Network so we can continue to provide you coverage. Go to myjbn.com/support and be a part of the Black College Sports Network.
They can follow their dreams.
Supermarket sushi, really?
No. Wait, Troy, you work here?
I'm never not working. Like Head & Shoulders Scalp Shield technology, up to 100% dandruff protection, even between washes.
Never not working, huh?
Oh, Troy, you're such a good teacher.
Yeah, I know. Never not working. Never not working. Never, ever not working.
Are you serious?
Never not working. Dandruff protection that's never not working. Head & Shoulders Scalp Shield technology.
Let's get back to strolling instead of scrolling. Before we can safely come together, we need the facts on COVID-19 vaccines. Visit getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision for yourself and for your family.
This is Dr. Ville with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Mike is out on assignment. As we were talking about that little bit of break, that big shot I was talking about before we get into it, some other news there was between FAMU and Bethune-Cookman. FAMU went on the road to Daytona to play that rivalry game, and it came down to the last second shot. We ready? We want to jump in there and give them a shot at that, or we want to discuss a little more before we jump into that?
In 15 seconds, Doc, and I had that clip ready to roll.
Oh, okay. As we're doing that, let me talk. Oh, you go ahead, Charles.
No, I was going to mention in terms of news, and I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up, but Black College Championships named our own Dr. Cavill a senior consultant. So I want to make sure we got that out there and congratulate Dr. Cavill in terms of being named that. And this is a quote from Michael Coker. We're delighted to have Dr. Cavill join the Black College Championship team. He's a well-respected creative leader. And as an HBCU media pioneer, he will fit right in with this stellar opportunity for continuing to shape the HBCU landscape and assist in the leading of the Black College Championship to help break new ground. So congratulations, Doc.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yeah, I was proud of that opportunity, consultant. I was really surprised and taken back, and I really want to give all those that have given me kudos of how much it resonated with a lot of folks out there that were saying congratulations. Many people were saying that they were excited to see that it would happen, and I, to do a great job. And just the reverence that people put out there on the announcement really shook me, and I took it to heart. So I'm gonna go to work as I always do and what I know to do. And I do want to tell everybody I really appreciate that acknowledgement. It means a lot to see that. Mm-hmm. With that, let's get into it. As we were ready to go, before we do that, let me get into some of these cancellations. COVID-19 is serious. It's affecting basketball across the country. We've seen it in terms of some of the football bowl games. But as of today, we had Howard going to Pennsylvania. It's canceled. You had Mid-Atlantic Christian going to North Carolina Central, postponed. You had some forfeits yesterday in the SWAC. We'll get into that. Prairie View was not able to travel to Grambling. Interesting to see will they make it to Southern. Nothing has been announced one way or another. So are they going to be able to get in there? So they start off on one on the women's side. Valley had to cancel, so they have a forfeit. So you already see COVID-19 wrecking shop in terms of the SWAC. It's going to be fascinating to see how that goes. You do have some games tomorrow. Obviously, a lot of games put up there. Yeah, Bethune-Cookman will stay outside the conference. After the rival game, they'll travel to Florida International on the men's side. But then you have conference games, Alabama A&M Valley, Auckland State, Jackson State, Alabama State at Arkansas Pine Bluff. Prairie View is scheduled to travel to Southern, Texas Southern at Grambling. We'll get into those Monday games, but that's scheduled there. In terms on the independents, you have Presbyterian at Hampton, which is supposed to be on the day. So we'll get you some updates maybe throughout that game. North Carolina A&T was supposed to go to Campbell. That game was postponed. You do have, in terms of Thursday, UT Martin at Tennessee State. You have on the independent side, Presbyterian at North Carolina A&T on Wednesday. Independent games, furthermore, UT Martin at Tennessee State is also Thursday. So it's fascinating to see if these games will get in and how it will affect moving forward. With that, let's see if we can get in to see a little bit of this magic that took place on Monday as the SWAC kicked off SWAC play in this new 12-member conference format. That was sweet. That's sweet. That's sweet. Everybody get quiet. Not a lot of noise, except for if you're a family rally. Oh man, that's a tough way to get it done at home. Wildcat. I tell you, that was big time.
Drew, you hit that.
Drew, I'm gonna go back to you. I had to let you say everything you put in work over there. What were your thoughts when you saw that shot? Did you talk a little bit? Did you throw up your hands? You know, what were your first reactions when you were like, "Oh, we got this"?
Ralph Sampson versus the Lakers, 1985. In the playoffs,
fan, you had to go there. Huh?
The turnaround,
the half turnaround. He didn't even remember. Ralph Sampson didn't even get to turn around all the way. This was more of a turnaround right here. But that was just the first thing that came to mind because it just kind of reminded me of that over the shoulder half hook, half jump shot that she shot just like Ralph Sampson. It was coming from a different angle, but that's the first thing I do. And look, anytime we get a victory over Bethune, I don't care if we out skeet shooting, marbles, whatever. We gonna take it because you know the 9 years I had to deal with, the 10 years, 9 football games I had to deal with. So it's time for FAMU to get on the roll in anything when it comes to us and Bethune. Too bad the men weren't able to carry the momentum though. Because Bethune's men did defeat us.
I can dig it. I like it. Let me give a shout out to some of these listeners out here before we get into some of this basketball talk. I want to get into it. We're gonna start with the WAC Division One, and like I said, we give you some because there's a big game on the Division Two level, and it might surprise you because Shivery's not dead. Stick with us for that. We'll give you that update in the second half of the show. As we get into it, let's shout out to Chris Tucker, Chad Cooper in the house, Ricky Burton, Hogan, Dr. Holmes is here, G Boom Holly, PVN with a second forfeit. So it has been announced that they are not traveling to Southern. So Southern goes to 2-0, and they have taken down the Texas Tornado, if you would. So tough to get off the Scott for the regular season champions of last year. It'd be interesting to see what this looks like. COVID is real, and we are seeing it raising the heads. Congratulations, Kevin Crawford. In terms of my accolades, I appreciate that, Fred. Give you some love there. Herbert Bolden is out here checking us out. Carl Moore, Karen Griffin, as always. Thanks for all the tough emails. Great emails, I should say, with the academic approach. You know, I use that kind of stuff for class. So keep those coming, Karen. Steve Gaither is in the house. Great news that he's putting out there for HBCU game day. LaShawn Harris, she's happy that Jags are 2-0. Yes, they are. Fred Whitten, that is correct. They got it done by the second game forfeit. Unfortunate thing is no stats because of that, but you do get it in the record, which means there may be some uneven stats in terms of the number of games. Obviously, stats are done by percentages, so that won't be a problem on that side, but you don't get to have that extra game and how that may affect individuals in terms of player of the week. So you had some great games by some Southern Jaguars in terms of what they did at Texas Southern. Will somebody's 2 game be able to outdo somebody's 1 game is one of the things that I think about in terms of the forfeit. Any additional thoughts you have on that, Drew?
Yeah, it's really interesting with the SWAC policy. SWAC and SIAC put out a policy. Both the policies mirror each other. Big South has a policy a little bit different than those conferences. Haven't seen anything official from the BAC and CIAA, although I'm pretty sure internally they have released a policy to their coaches. But when it comes to the SWAC, considering 8 teams still only make it to the tournament, will these games be the games that cost somebody getting to the tournament, or on the flip side, be the game that bump somebody into the tournament? And how would these games affect seeding come tournament time? It's going to be interesting in the SWAC.
I think that's the bigger thing. I think if a team is solid enough, they'll probably get enough wins to be in the tournament. But what this will affect, as you said, is the seeding. So what is crazy about this, we kind of seen this in regards to last year at the NBA level. We had what some would think is a later, Western Division type game when the Lakers had to do the playing game in a new format. They were taking on Phoenix, a Lakers team that just won the championship the year before. You can see something like that where you would get a Prairie View Texas Southern type matchup or a Prairie View Southern matchup in the quarterfinals, right? Versus seeing that in the semifinals and the finals.
Right.
That's a tough matchup. And in a lot of ways, that's a matchup. If you're one of those two teams, you're like, I hate to start off the tournament with a team that is seeded, 7th and 8th, because the top 8 teams make it still. And this time, all teams will go to Birmingham versus having quarterfinals on your home court. So that's a little different too. So to have an advantage of having your quarterfinals at home against a lower seed, now you go to a neutral site, which kind of evens that out. It's early in the tournament, so you're not necessarily going to have a huge crowd there, unless it's maybe one of the Alabama teams. So think about how that plays out also in terms of that. So this is something to keep your eyes on. So great point in terms of seeding. Let me go to
Now, and I'll be honest, I was kind of surprised that the SWAC kind of took such a hardline stance, because we've seen with this Omicron variant that people who have taken their shots and have done the booster, they can still, get this virus. So I was, a little bit kind of taken aback, in terms of there's two
things though competing here. I'm glad you asked that point. There's two things competing here. You have the guidelines that the conference has to set up to make sure that everybody's playing by the same rule. But the conference can use the CDC 5-day guideline.
Okay.
Right? Because that's the national standard. But that doesn't preclude a home institution to having a more stringent policy.
Right.
Just like you had ability to have the minutes for certain students, you have your NCAA, you have your SWAC guidelines on what you're going to do, but each institution has their own guidelines. So Prairie View could have a 10-day, they could have the original 14, 15-day that they are going by. That has nothing to do with the SWAC. SWAC can control that. They got to get out there in terms of the games to be played, and they got to manage that. The other issue, before I let you, Drew, to jump back in here in terms of some great comments, is you also have the fact that now you are geographically spread out. Do you want to create the additional cost of a team having to reschedule a game? And what if that game is Texas, Florida?
Florida, yeah, that could be an issue.
Now you're talking about doing flights and rescheduling flights. So sometimes it's just, cost mitigation, internal preparation. And so you got to make some tough decisions. So I think we have to be careful about saying how much of this is SWAC. It just gave you guidelines. We need to take a little deeper and say how much of this is Prairie View and their own guidelines and their rules in terms of the functionality, which you would need to point to the athletic director and the decisions that he's making in his shop in regards to the medical framing. So we need to get what the policies at Prairie View in terms of mitigation. And unfortunately, it's been quiet down there in regards to what's going out. So we just don't know.
Sure.
And I was going to say something about that, because if you look at it, Dr. Cavill, both the CDC guideline and the SWAC policy occurred at almost an inopportune time, because these policies have come out over the last 2.5 weeks, when most of the decision makers on these campuses are not on campus. They may have met Zoom. They may not have met by Zoom.
SWAC, no, I'll tell you this. I know this from the SWAC for a fact. The SWAC does not make any unilateral decisions without the approval of the presidents and the chancellors. So if this was released, it's because the presidents of the SWAC and the chancellors voted for it and supported it. It was the presidents and the chancellors that made this decision. The SWAC office, what the SWAC office does in terms of rules and guidelines, let me make this very clear for those that don't. They will provide options. They will say, what will you all like to see? What is important to you? Playing the games, financial stress, safety. What are your priorities? And you list them. You tell us what is the most important. Based on those criteria, we will come back with options, and they'll give it to the senior women administrators. They vote and provide a framework on it. They will give it to the athletic directors, VPs of athletics. They will have a vote on it. Then they send that and they have a final vote in terms of the presidents and chancellors. and they ultimately make the decision. And what the conference does is they actually make sure that the guidelines that are voted on by all the parties involved are followed. They are the ones that are responsible for making sure that everything goes like what everybody decided they wanted to do. So we need to be careful, because over the years, I've heard a lot of folks talk about SWAC office, this and that, and they're not understanding that the SWAC office, much like the NCAA, they provide the carrier and make sure people follow the guidelines, but they have very little power in terms of implementing that. Let's go to the break, and then we'll come back on the other side. We'll give you final thoughts if you have any final thoughts on this great discussion and dialogue. And the members out here, in terms of the lab listeners, are getting some great information as well and putting some out there. So we'll cut back, and then we'll get into a little talk, because we do want to get some action in terms of what took place. We teased you with that great play that had FAMU winning the game at the buzzer. But let's take this break, and we'll be right back after this break.
Your ad could be ran here. MyJBN.com/support. MyJBN.com/support for more information.
Itchy, squirmy, scratchy, family not getting clean? Get Charmin Ultra Strong. Go get 'em. It just cleans better. With a diamond weave texture, your family can use less while still getting clean.
Goodbye, itchy squirm. Hello, cream bottom.
We all go. Why not enjoy the go with Charmin?
From novice to aficionado, find yourself here. High quality cigars plus personal customer service. Slow Burn is Waco's only mobile cigar lounge, featuring a meticulous, curated collection of premium cigars. Visit our website, www.slowburnwaco.com. That's www.slowburnwaco.com.
You see, Head & Shoulders has scalp shield technology, protects against flakes even between washes. It's never not working.
Kind of like us. Number 15?
Never not working.
I don't like this one.
Me neither.
Let's get out of here.
Head & Shoulders scalp shield, never not working.
It's like a loop machine. All around town, trying to get down. It's like a loop machine.
This is Dr. Bill with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Mike Washington is out on the side. So we have the adjunct. No, is a visiting clinical professor. He's kind off on the paperwork. Drew is in the building. We'll put it that way, Professor Drew. And we have, obviously, Professor Bishop standing on top here. Let's get into some of these scores at least. You had Southern women on the women's side. Sherry's not there. Let's start with the women. Southern, 10 spot over Texas Southern University. Cynthia Cooper was not on the sideline. So that was interesting to see. Southern got it done in terms of that matchup. But you had maybe a slight surprise. Prairie View, Coach Pugh, looks like she might be back in the basketball business. She got it done against Grambling, 65-57, in terms of that matchup on the road. So you'll have a Prairie View Southern matchup this tomorrow, Wednesday. So that'll be fascinating in terms of what goes on there. And then obviously Texas Southern at Grambling. Now, on to Florida A&M Bethune-Cookman. We told you about that at the buzzer as FAMU wins 70-68 to get it done there. Alabama A&M takes it to Pine Bluff, 58-48. Alabama A&M continues on the women's side to make those next steps. Look like they'll be in here. I told you about earlier, you did have the forfeit of Valley forfeiting a game to Alabama State. So Alabama State goes in 1-0. Any thoughts on those first matchups? I guess we got into the FAMU game there, Drew. Any additional comments that you had on that matchup, or you wanted to stick about just how big that win was FAMU over Bethune-Cookman?
Nah, I'm gonna be fair. I'm gonna get it in. Alabama A&M women did not get off to a good start in the non-conference season, so It's nice to see them get that early season victory against UAPB. And anytime Prairie View can go into Louisiana and get a victory, men, women, whatever, it's a good victory for Prairie View. So,
when I take a look at it, I think the one that really kind of made me peek over there was Alabama A&M and UAPB. UAPB is going to be one of my sleeper teams over there in the SWAC West. They had a pretty good out of conference schedule or a good showing, I think, in the out of conference. When you got 3 scorers for UAPB that are in double digits, and they have a nice little 4-game win streak. They had double-digit wins over USM and a nice victory over Tulane over there on the women's side. So the UAPB Alabama A&M game was a really interesting one to me. And when you take a look at the women's side of the ledger, when you take a look at Jackson State, Alabama State, and Alabama A&M, they're going to be fighting it out, I think, over there in the SWAC East. And then you had Bethune-Cookman that's coming over there. There's a pedigree program as well. You have a lot of parity over there on the women's side of the ball in the SWAC. And then I think, Texas Southern is trying to get back in the mix with Ataya Bridges and Nia Mitchell, both leading the way for Texas Southern. Prairie View, I think they're going to be right there in the mix as well. And then Southern, they're consistent. When you take a look at their scoring, I mean, you just go right down the roster and somebody's contributing. That's been the hallmark of Carlos Funches' teams for the past few years, where they play hard defense and they just get scoring from so many different places. So good win last night for the Southern Lady Jaguars over Texas Southern.
And I need y'all to help me out with something, since I'm new to SWAC basketball. Traditionally, SWAC has played the double round robin, where everybody played each other twice. Do y'all think that with the schedules being already uneven before we even deal with COVID, some teams not playing each other home and home, do y'all think that's going to affect how we see some of these standings come out, both on the men and the women's side?
Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah. The problem is we won't really find out to the end how it affected.
Yeah.
Going in, you'll have your preseason favorites. We'll get into it when we look at the men. Part of that was Texas Southern being the preseason favorite, and they took an L on the road to Southern and got beat up pretty good in that matchup. I mean, it got down to 4 points in the second half, but Southern controlled most of their game and then pulled out late and won by 13, 63-50. Now, the other thing that I think is going to be interesting that people may not want to talk about is not only are you forfeiting some of these games, but you're not playing. Texas Southern came in on a long rest because they had, matchups postponed, canceled because of COVID, whether it was them or the other team. But that the fact that you're not practicing playing. We saw last year with North Carolina Central, a team that is usually perennially really well in the MEAC, certainly well coached, and we saw that up and close, right? On why not us? In terms of how that affected him. And the coach was very open with how he thought that affected him with his lack of practice, not being able to get into it, not to say that he made an excuse for the schools that were able to get it done, but he's saying how it affected his team. So that's another thing to keep your eyes on. Again, I told you about Southern moving to the men's side. Southern over Texas Southern 63-50. You had Alabama A&M make a significant statement, 70-50 over Arkansas Pine Bluff on the road. Pine Bluff usually plays really well. Obviously, a new head coach there. Coach that made his team running during the game. It's going to be interesting to see what he's going to continue to do now. It may not be the players. He may need to look at himself in terms of what get done. Whether it's recruiting better players, what have you, we'll see that. I'm not saying that it's particularly X's and O's. Obviously, he was good at what he did and why he got the job, but something to keep your eyes on. Alabama State gets it done against Mississippi Valley State, 84-75.
Without Mo Williams.
Second year. Yeah. Without Mo Williams in terms of what's going on there. So it's fascinating to see there. Obviously, we talk about the forfeit Prairie View to Grambling. So interesting matchup. And then Bethune-Cookman got a little revenge in terms for their women as they get it done at home against FAMU 66-59. So interesting to see. New coach on that program. We'll get to see some of these matchups moving on throughout the conference. But going to you, Charles, what was statement game that you saw here? Was it that Texas Southern, or did something else stand up? Alabama A&M Pine Bluff, or was it a couple of them? What did you see out of this week?
Definitely Texas Southern. That was the standout game for me last night. Texas Southern, we all know, everybody in SWAC knows that you have to do that Texas two-step with Texas Southern and Prairie View. Any win over perennial pedigree program like Texas Southern, that's one that you kind of raise your eyebrow at and say, okay. And we know that Southern is going to be scrappy. They were, ravaged by injuries last year. Looks like they're on solid footing this year. They're going to be a team that's going to be right there in the mix, and that's just who they are. They get after you on the defensive side of the ball. They're already tops in the nation in terms of creating turnovers. We saw that last night with the Texas Southern game, and they were able to get a huge win over Texas Southern.
Great points made. Let me go to you, Drew. Like you said, you're new to the SWAC now. Now your eyes turn here. Obviously, still watch a lot of the SIAC Division II. Again, we'll get a chance to touch on that because it was a big game that I want to keep reminding folks that we need to make sure that we're sharing the love in terms of HBCU to follow some of these other big-time matchups. And we'll let you know when they go on so you can maybe peek around where places where you don't necessarily have your fandom, I guess just to say it. But in terms of SWAC matchups, anything stood out to you in terms of the first set of games that were played on Monday to kick things off on the men's side?
Just to avoid the redundancy, because Texas Southern was a shocker to me, but Alabama State, Mississippi Valley State. Reason why I pulled that game out is we got to think about it in this what I call this modern era of high-profile ex-professional athletes who are coaching in the SWAC. Everybody has to remember, Mo Williams, the coach of Alabama State, was the first one to come as a former athlete back in this new modern era. Before Coach Prime came to Jackson State in football, Mo Williams came to Alabama State in basketball. Now,
well, Cynthia Cooper was at Texas Southern as well. So
okay, right. Well, let me correct my statement on the men's side. We'll say that on the men's side. So we know Alabama State, because they didn't play any non-conference games last year, really didn't have a chance. But this year, Mo Williams, second year, maybe he's gotten the opportunity to start getting his players in, start getting the system in, and start doing things. And just like Coach Prime, Mo Williams has been away for personal reasons. Also, I believe he had a child that was been born over the last few weeks. But in a similar vein, he had to step away from his program to deal with some personal issues. So Alabama State being able to get off on a good start. Let's see if they get on that roll in the SWAC.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And when you look that way, the other thing is who they were playing was Lindsey Hunter, Mississippi Valley, who has struggled inside about that. But to your point, that is fascinating to see. Is the next step for Alabama State in terms of the talent on that team? And they got the big win over Texas Southern. People forget at home last year when Texas Southern was trying to battle. Ultimately, it came down to Jackson State and Prairie View in terms of going undefeated, but Jackson State showed in the tournament that talent was there. So this is going to be very early in the season. It's fascinating. And that brings us to the fact that we haven't talked about Jackson State at Alcorn, which is a game that's coming up, will be on Wednesday in terms of the rivalry game that was pushed there. So that's going to be one that fascinating to me. As we get into that, let's take a break. And then we'll come back and let you get in there, because I want to get into some of those next matchups that are coming on Thursday. So we'll be back and get you to talk a little more about that. Let's take our last break. We'll bring you into that fourth quarter. Women's basketball, they do the fourth quarter. I know in men, they do 2 halves, but we're going to stick with the 4.
Thank you guys for what you do for HBCU athletics. This is a fantastic avenue for all of us. This is our ESPN, so we love what you guys do. Brian, AD, Roy, all you guys at BCSN. We really appreciate what it is that you guys do for us.
200 years, Montgomery, Alabama has been making history by people who had the courage to stand up for change. Today, this riverfront city has been reborn, embracing the past and looking forward to the future. From the National Memorial for Peace and Justice to the stage of the Alabama Shakespeare Festival, this is where history was and is made. We are proud to call Montgomery home, and together, we can be the change.
This is Dr. Gaville inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Let me shout out to Ryan McGinty. He put out there Larry Smith for Alcorn State. That's right. Mean green, as they say. And as Charles pointed out, if you got to talk to him off the court, he wasn't like this. So he must have played at a different level for him to earn that nickname, because he just would have never known. Great point made. Let's turn it around a little bit. Oh, did you want to do a shout out, Charles? Did I interrupt?
Let me shout out my Murrah Mustang alumni. Lindsey Hunter coaching in Valley. You got Mo Williams coaching Alabama State. Mo wasn't there last night. Another Murrah Mustang takes over for Trey Johnson. So shout out to the Murrah Mustang. So alumni.
Why not? Let's just love going around. Love going around. I got you. Well, we have Valley hosting Alabama A&M in the matchup on Wednesday. We also have, Pine Bluff hosting Alabama State. You have Texas Southern traveling to Grambling. You just heard on here that Prairie View will forfeit to Southern, so that game will not take place. I told you Bethune-Cookman will play on Wednesday, non-conference game. FAMU was off. Then you got the rivalry of Mississippi with Alcorn and Jackson State. Charles, let's start with you. A lot of people interested in that matchup for multiple reasons. What are your thoughts on that game?
We get to see this Jackson State Lady Tigers basketball team back in action. Starting conference play, Amisha Williams, she's already leading the conference in scoring and rebounds. Deja Rogan, they are a tremendous 1-2 punch. So, it's going to be fascinating watching the SWAC East with Jackson State, Alabama A&M, Alabama State, and Bethune-Cookman. And then you're always going to get that fight out of Texas Southern, that fight out of Southern, that fight out of Prairie View. And like I said, keep an eye on UAPB. I think they're going to be right there in the mix. Joyce Kennerson is back and healthy. And if you remember Joyce Kennerson at Texas Southern, she was one of the leading players in the league for a couple years ago. But now she's healthy for UAPB. I think she's going to add some tremendous scoring punch to that UAPB offense. So it's a lot of parity over there on the women's side of the ball.
Yeah, I'm interested in that matchup because Alabama State has always played really basketball. They took a little dip and they were right back in the mix last year, surprising a lot of people as they ascended to the top of the conference. Not able to quite get it done in terms of the regular season or the tournament, but they were right there. They were the team that beat Jackson State in the regular season. Obviously, they had another loss that took them out of place of tying and getting a co-champions for the regular season, but took it right to the buzzer in the tournament with Jackson State. Got it done to their credit. But I want to shout out Alabama A&M women. Because Pine Bluff had some big wins coming in their non-conference, but they won that game on the road 58-48. So you're right. I'm fascinated on the women's side by Alabama State and Pine Bluff. Pine Bluff does not want to go down 0-2, particularly with the two games at home.
Exactly.
So that's going to be fascinating and a tough one. And Alabama State, as they are, they're going to come in there like some Hornets, and they're going to certainly try to get it done.
They rebound you to death.
Yeah, they'll get on there. With that being said, I'm going to go to you, Drew. What are some of the big matchups that you're seeing that you're prepared to watch this Wednesday in terms of these games that I talked about? Obviously, Prairie View at Southern. On the women's side, that game will still take place. Obviously, we talked about the men having a forfeit, but Texas Southern and Grambling. You big matchup here now. Neither one of these teams want to go down 0-2, so somebody's going to be fighting to try to get in there, get that first win to feel better. Certainly, if you're on the road for Texas Southern, it's important if you can split. We know how that is. And you at home, you don't want to get the first two losses, as we talk about Pine Bluff on the women's side. Alabama State at Pine Bluff gave you some love there. Alcorn and Jackson State. Alabama A&M at Valley. That's fascinating. The question is on that one, is that also going to be a forfeit in terms of Valley not being able to get off the slide? We said they had a forfeit there. But then you got on the men's side, Alabama A&M is rolling. Can they make another statement, get off to a great start on the road, getting first 2 against Valley? When you talk about that, Jackson State wants to make a statement, especially as they seen the carnage going on the men's side. Alabama State, Arkansas Pine Bluff, will tell you there, that's going to be fascinating. Again, Pine Bluff does not want to go 0-2, both men's and women, so that's fascinating. Texas Southern, Grambling on the men's side, we told you how important that is. Prairie View, obviously Southern will be a forfeit. With that being said, men's or women's, what draws your attention for the Wednesday game, Drew?
Can I go outside the SWAC conference?
Yeah.
The game I really want to see is see what happens with Tennessee State and UT Martin. You know, Tennessee State is a team that we don't talk about too often here in the on our show because they're one of those forgotten teams, so they don't play in one of the traditional conference. But Tennessee State, 5-7, trying to get off to a good start in the Ohio Valley.
And you talking
Conference.
about the women? You talking about the women in terms of being 5-7? To their credit, to your point, I'll give it back to you, is that the women are 2-0 conference play with the big shot by a guard out of Houston that shot a half quarter that went in to get the win after hitting 3 free throws at the end of the game when she was fouled to send it into credit to what she was able to do, Caleb, there. She was the prime and got on ESPN in terms of a top 10 shot when she hit that game-winning shot at the end. But go ahead, Drew.
And correct, that was the men who are 5-7. The women are actually 7-6. So, but Tennessee State, both on the men and the women's side, to see if they can keep it going. You know, as they open up conference play, you know, they had a hell of an out of conference. Now it's time to step into conference play.
Because you're right, because men hadn't been able to get into conference play yet.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's what I want to see. What are these teams for real in the Ohio Valley Conference?
Before I shove it back to Charles to see any additional thoughts he might want to see about some conference games, because I want to keep my eyes obviously at Norfolk State on the men's side to shut it down. But they were rolling. They had 9 wins, 6-7 of them Division I wins, so they were playing really well. Several of those were against HBCU talent. So if I did do a poll, they were top in the poll. In fact, let me talk a little bit about the poll that y'all did this week. I'm just going to give the top one. People can go as you put this out on the website for the end of the week. Division II men, you have the top 2 teams as Fayetteville State, Virginia. Sneak in number 3 because they're out of SIC. Benedict, 8-5, 8-9-3, respectively. That's 3-0, 2-0, and 6-0 in terms of the conference rates. Side, that's women. On the men's side, Division II, Fayetteville State, Virginia, and Benedict as well. 8-5, 8-3, 9-3 in terms of what you're seeing there. Division I rankings, Norfolk State 6-4. Men in terms of what's going on there, Southern is 4-7. Texas Southern 2-7. Obviously, a big when they had against Florida, I'm sure helps them. Benedict on the women, and I know you want a matchup coming up here, so I'll go 4 deep: 10-4, 9-3, 8-9-0. That's for Benedict. Lincoln, Pennsylvania, Tuskegee, and Savannah State. They're 6-0, 2-0, 3-0, 3-1, I should say, 5-0 in terms of conference play. Doesn't Tuskegee have a game with Savannah State coming up this week, Drew?
That would be tomorrow, Dr. Cavill. That game takes place at 6:30 Eastern, 5:30 Central in Tuskegee, Alabama. Savannah State coming in 9-0. Tuskegee coming in 8-2 on the season. And right now, on the women's side in the SIC, there are 4 teams who seem to have separated themselves from everybody else. Tuskegee and Miles on the west side, Benedict and Savannah State on the east side. So it's going to be fun if you're a women's college basketball fan in the SIAC. One thing I want to note about you, those polls, the BCSN rankings that you read at the BCSN, one thing we did not do, we did not count the games against lower divisions. So even though we know Norfolk is 9-4, for our For our computers, they are only 6-4 because we only counted Division I games versus other Division I opponents.
I'm glad you pointed that out.
So, when somebody say, hey, Norfolk's 9-4, you just said they were 6-4. That's why they're listed as 6-4 in their poll right there, Doc. Now I'll turn it over to Charles, but there's a couple other small mid-major games, as you like to call them, that I wanted to point out for people. But we'll turn it over to Charles first.
No, before you do that, I want to keep with you, and then I'll let Charles have some closing thoughts on those mid-majors. Let's show them the love. But I did want to point out the rest of the polls in terms of Division I. Obviously, Division I wins early. You have early with Tennessee State, as you talked about, 6-6, 2-0 conference race out of the OVC. Hampton, 5-6, 1-0, Big South. Then you get into Morgan State, 6-4, no conference games. They start on Saturday. Coppin State sitting at 3-5. And then Arkansas Pine Bluff coming in, as we saw, and we talked about why it's important for them to get that win tomorrow. They were ranked 5, 3-6 coming in there with some of those big Division I wins. We've seen this last with Alabama A&M on the men's side getting on the hot start and then really stumble in conference race. Interesting to see what that looks like there. Talladega Rust, make sure we give the NI women some love. You have Talladega at 10-3, Rust at 10-3. Charles, make sure you give a shout out, and I got Russ.
I got to make sure.
Make sure I won't make
Lady Bearcat.
I'm doing my job now. Russ out there now. We put him out there.
Yes, indeed.
In there right after Stillman 5-5, 8-3, and then we'll go ahead and give Florida Memorial some love. They should up there and check us out too in terms of the Magic Man down there with music. 7-5, 5-0, a lot of things there. What were the points that you wanted to make sure we told people to keep their eyes on? So some big time Division II NIA matchups coming up this week, Drew.
Hey, on the men's side in the NAIA, hey, you got Talladega, who's a top 15 program. I believe they were ranked number 12 in the last NAIA poll. They played number 2 Loyola on this Saturday, and that's a conference matchup, and that's in Talladega at 3:00 Eastern. And also, same conference, Southern States Conference, Stillman plays Faulkner, which is another top 15. No, excuse me. Stillman is 15. Faulkner is receiving votes in the latest NAIA poll. So you got 2 ranked teams on the men's side in NAIA. We already talked about Savannah State and Tuskegee. Let's go over to the CIAA on the women's side, where Elizabeth City plays skip that one. They would play West Virginia State. Florida Memorial plays a conference game. They're number 2 in the conference. They played number 3 in the conference, who is Ave Marie. That game is Saturday, and that's a 4:00 game. Last one, number 2, Florida Memorial in the Sun Conference plays a number 1 team in the Sun Conference, and that is Thursday. And they play the Southeastern Fire, and that's at 5:30 on Thursday.
Don't say we don't give you all the HBCU love right here. Thank you for giving that little dime and that pass back. Let me pass it to Charles. Any final thoughts as Drew just, lit it up in terms of some of those matchups that you need to keep your eyes on if you call yourself an HBCU sports fan?
Big matchup tomorrow. I think the Jackson State Lady Tigers, regular season champion and the tournament champion from last year. They're back on the hardwood, getting ready for conference play, taking on Alcorn. If we remember last year, they stubbed their toe against Alabama State early and then went on an incredible run through the season, getting the regular season championship. So, got some WNBA prospects, Lamisha Williams, hitting the court conference play tomorrow. So.
Yeah, I was going to wonder how you were going to tie that in regards to why we're going to keep our eyes on that, because Alcorn State Braves, much respect, they not going to have a chance. Jack State, you could have kept that, trying to play that big up in terms of
rebound.
I like the way you did it for the home team. I like the way you made sure that there was a good point that some of some potential WNBA talent on the court. That's how you do it. If you're gonna make a shout out, you got to make it relevant, and you did that. That'll do it for us. We'll close on that. Thank you for listening to Inside HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. I am Kenyatta Cavill, the Dean of HBCU Sports, coming from inside the lab in the College of HBCU with Mike Watson, Charles Bishop. Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Bill's Inside HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Watson, Charles Bishop. Told you Mike was on assignment. Be back with us on Thursday. We'll be here at 6 o'clock. We'll get into some of the matchups in terms of what took place on Wednesday, And then we'll start telling you what to look for on Saturday, because you have both the SWAC and me in action in terms of what's going on there. We'll sneak out and tell you who won that game between Savannah State in terms of Tuskegee. We'll keep eyes on, see where we can get that, but that'll do it for us. Shout out to Professor Drew as he gave us the love and gave us the insight today. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavill, on Facebook and Instagram. That's Dr. KENYATTACAVIL. Again, that's Dr. KENYATTACAVIL. Inside HBCU Sports Lab 1 on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube is Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Dream big and continue to move forward. We will talk with you soon. Professor Drew.
Of course.
Professor Bishop.
Lecture.
Dismissed.
Hey, Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy
Got
New
to say
Year,
it.
everybody.
Happy New Year.
Get a good one.